are worried about India's private sector parking its money in projects overseas because that money could have been utilized in India to increase productivity and would have also had a direct impact on the country's GDP. Earlier, I did catch up with Commerce and Industry Minister Anand Sharma and began by asking him on this very alarming trend.
You see, one thing is it's indicative also of the self-confidence which the Indian corporate sector has today to engage with the rest of the world, to go in for major acquisitions and mergers, and to become global. At the same time, we would like to create an environment which is more supportive of investments. We will not ask our corporate not to invest abroad. But at the same time, India has the appetite for huge investments, both by the domestic investors and the foreign investors. And it's true that last year has not been a good year for us. Whereas at the peak of the economic crisis, India remained one of the most favored destinations for foreign investors. There could be multiple factors which had accumulated.
What are some of those factors according to you?
No, without going into those factors, I think that we are now moving into ensure that all the investors are fully reassured that we have been and we remain an investor-friendly country. We will have in place more investor-friendly regime through the new policy initiative, a major policy initiative which we are in the final stage of taking. And once that rolls out, it will be transformative.
But sir, you know, the question that I want to ask you, and you made a very valid point. You've given the other side of the story that perhaps there's a lot more of self-confidence, and which is why Indians are going overseas. But if you look at the other side of the coin, most people believe that because there is a little, because there are issues of governance, because wrong stories, because, scams are making headlines in this country, people perhaps are losing...
I don't think that's the reason at all.
You don't think people are losing faith in the system
that
here?
would be a mistake. I would like to correct it for all your viewers. Because if anybody is under this impression that the so-called one or two scams have had a dampening effect on the investors' confidence, that is not a correct thing. It is trendy and fashionable to say so. India has to be viewed in a correct perspective.
But here you're saying that there has been no loss of faith in the system by either foreign investors or Indian corporates themselves?
I'm not going to say that. They need reassurance because we are still a developing country. When you look at when we started in 1991, this rationalization is still on. We have to bring about a greater degree of uniformity and cohesion so that the decision making, particularly when it comes to mandated clearances, industry is assured, both domestic industry as well as the foreign investors, that the costs will be low and the clearances will not become a process where there are years of delays. And we are addressing this, and hopefully the manufacturing policy will take care of that.
In the national manufacturing policy that you've spoken extensively about, are environmental clearances and an archaic land acquisition policy the biggest hurdle?
Those issues will get addressed because states will be partner. And I have always believed, as the industry minister, that the zoning of the land, the mapping of the land, has to be done by the states, particularly the industrial zones. And it should be unculturable land, wasteland, shrubland, only as an exception, not as a rule.
That's right.
A single crop land should be there. So unculturable land should be the priority while zoning the land.
That's right.
Though adequate availability of water and the water budget has to be carefully prepared.
Last month alone, about 397 companies invested more than $5 billion overseas. Would you not, as the Commerce and Industry Minister, want that money to be invested here?
No, but I think we got inward investment more than that.
And that's
we have got in the calendar year more than 12 billion in the first 5 months. And what was cleared subsequently, that was the Keynes Vedanta. And what is in the pipeline, before 6 months are over of the calendar year figures, I think we should be crossing far more than the halfway mark. 2/3 of what we were unfortunately got last year, which was on the lower side. And I'm sure that to a large extent, with what we have in mind, the policies in the pipeline, will be able to make up for the losses last year, will be able to offset and do much better.
You know, I'm glad you're optimistic, and which is why I want to ask you this question. Some of the biggest deals that we've seen in the recent times, say a Kane Vedanta, say a RIL BP deal, or even for that matter, India's largest FDI investment, POSCO, while most of this is nearing clearance now, it's perhaps taken months, if not years, for instance, for POSCO to happen. Doesn't that kind of bother you? Doesn't that concern you? Doesn't that irk you as the industry minister?
Yes, delays should be reduced to the minimum possible, and that's why I'm referring to the policy initiatives which would take care of these aspects.
As the Commerce Minister, don't you agree that simple corporate transactions do not need to go to EGOMs, do not need to go to the cabinet, and they can just be
Well,
cleared
we
by the
have gone in for
ministry?
simplification to a great extent. If you ask me that whether I am not concerned, I am very much concerned. I am concerned about lack of capital formation, lack of capital good imports, capacities are not being added, job creation as we would desire is not happening. The share of manufacturing in India's GDP is stagnating at where it was in percentage terms 20 years ago. Not that it has not grown, but so has the economy. So for a $1.7 trillion economy, if you have 16% manufacturing share in the GDP, it's a very alarming situation. All other comparable and competitive economies, nowhere it's less than 27-28%.
That's right. Most people in India Inc. have said that poor governance and policy paralysis is one of the reasons why they're investing overseas. You don't agree with that?
There are issues which had to be highlighted, but the story of India should not go wrong. It is our collective national duty.
With that, it's a wrap here on this edition of ET Insight. We'll be back next week with a brand new topic, but until then, do send us your feedback and suggestions. And from the entire team that puts this show together, it's been really good to be with you on this edition.